So, the next interview on the Life with the Lionesses series is an old friend of mine, an old mucker from my Hull Vixens day, my Hull days, who played for the Hull Vixens and then the Cottingham Vixens, originating from Scunthorpe, which is not a traditional rugby league area, but Joe Taylor, who played for the Lionesses in 2000. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks, Julia.
So,
What
how
a
did you?
lovely introduction.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So tell us a bit about how you got involved. A Scunny girl got involved from in rugby league in the first place.
Yeah, bizarre really, and nothing like most of the others that you've interviewed. Not from a rugby background, certainly not a rugby family. Like you say, lived in Scunny, which is a union town, and then moved over to Hull, which is obviously very much a league town. And rugby sort of brought all the sports together that I'd previously done. Went down to East Hull, and yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. And Thompson was the coach then, and yeah, Hull Vixens was the starting point. So yeah, I really enjoyed the club rugby. The girls were great, great team atmosphere, and yeah, you worked hard, played hard.
Yeah, yeah. So what sports did you play before you played rugby league then?
So the typical at college, I did netball, hockey, basketball, judo, which was where it sort of came into the rough and tumble side of stuff. And I've always been a swimmer, so a lot of all the sort of aerobic stuff and the strength stuff all came together with the speed and quite a little bit strong, shall we say? I had a bit of
Yeah,
strength.
you did have a bit of strength if I remembered. So wait,
Yeah.
what year or what age did you start playing rugby league then?
Yeah, so it was quite late, really. So it would have been, I was about 23. Yeah, 23, because I'd moved over to Hull when I was 21. Yeah,
Mm.
and it was shortly after that that I got involved with the Vixens and started playing rugby.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what was your pathway for playing for Great Britain then?
Um. Well, yeah. So I was playing obviously Vixens in the early 90s, and then 99. Well, around 97, 98, I started training with Chris Kerno, one of the girls from work, and really upped my fitness. And with that, and obviously the exposure through club rugby, then went and played a bit of the local county stuff, and then yeah, I was also around the 99 started playing British Police Rugby Union, but because I was out wide, so the transition wasn't particularly difficult. If I'd have been in the front and the forwards, it'd have been a different ball game, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. So you played county then? Can you remember much about the county games?
Um, yeah, well, I remember certainly playing down at the old Hull FC ground down near Parkers.
Boulevard.
Yeah, Boulevard. It was quite a gritty pitch, and over at KR to be fair. But yeah, a lot of it because it is so long ago. It is quite blurry with all the stuff that went on. I certainly remember all the travelling and stuff for the GB um, training. You know, the training events, and it was always down the M62 corridor. Very rarely with the training events in Hull.
No, no, absolutely. Yeah. So
Uh, but yeah, I enjoyed the counter stuff, and like I say, that was the feeder into the GB. That's where you got noticed and at the club level. So yeah, yeah, good times around then.
yeah, yeah. So you played for county, you got selected for the GB squad, which was the first thing. Tell us a bit about the preparation for the 2000 tour and what you had to do and those sort of
Yeah,
things.
so there was a lot of like I say, training up the M62 corridor, and we went to somewhere up here. Was it Sedberg? Somewhere up that
Could
way,
be.
for a training camp. Um, which again, all of the camps that we did do were well structured. Simon was on board with the conditioning stuff by then, so we did have regular fitness tests, and yeah, it was certainly a juggle around full-time work and trying to maintain that level of fitness that was pretty much expected. I mean, I wasn't the most natural rugby player, but my fitness sort of pulled me through that, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Because when did you join the police? Did you join the police when you moved to Hull then, or?
I joined the police in '91,
Yeah.
so I retired after 30 years last year. So I'm a pensioner.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Because I imagine juggling, an international career and the police must have been quite challenging.
yeah, and obviously the cliche of being female and playing rugby. Albeit I was really lucky because at the time there was it was either the deputy or the ACC of Humberside, and he was a sportsman, and so he allowed that time off for sport, of any level. But in particular, when he recognised obviously that it was at the level that it was, yeah. So I was lucky with time off through the higher ranks. It was sometimes more tricky to get the time off through my DI, but yeah, that's its time, I think. But yeah, so juggling. I mean, the British police stuff was easier because obviously it was representing police at British police level, so that was more easily recognisable. Rugby league for women wasn't a particularly, it wasn't high profile at the time, so trying to convince people that needing, was it 2 or 3 weeks for the World Cup was good use of taxpayers' money for Joe Taylor to be in a hotel up at Salford, somewhere that way on.
Mm,
so
mm.
so yeah, it was difficult at times, but I was quite strict with my own training, gym work and what have you. So, and the club rugby was still there as the base of training, and then there was the extra events, obviously leading up to the World Cup. Yeah, so it's same with anything,
Yeah,
juggling
yeah.
life and juggling work, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously you did all the training and the conditioning, which as Great Britain progressed got quite considerably more professional. How about the
Mm.
funding of it then? How did you manage with that?
Yeah, well, it was all we all did our own fundraising. So I got sponsorship through Bride Tyndall at the paint and body shop in
Oh,
Hull.
fantastic. Yeah.
It was always really good with the sponsorship stuff, and also through some the Cottingham Caravan Place as well. I got sponsorship through them. So yeah, but it was sending out begging letters, for something that, like I say, wasn't particularly high profile. So it wasn't like, saying that I play now for England women's football, where everybody would be throwing money at you like confetti, weren't they? For a piece of it. But at the time, yeah, it was sponsored events, all sorts of stuff. Yeah. And if you couldn't be bothered to sell your raffle tickets, you just put the 50 quid in yourself, which to be fair, happened. They're asking people again, the same people. Do you want to
Yeah.
buy a lottery ticket? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. So
yeah,
you got selected. What did you when you got the call up for the final squad, what did your family and friends think?
yeah, the family. I mean, they were obviously proud and everything else, but because we're not a rugby family,
Mm,
it's not like your Donna Primes and Parker and all those sort of people where it was
mm.
you know massive thing in their family life. So yeah, I mean, obviously the rugby girls were all around and knew that anyway. So yeah, and police friends again. It was the people that were around you recognize what effort you put into your training and stuff. So um, yeah, it was yeah. I think, like I say, because I'm not from a rugby family background and coming from the South Bank rather than being a Hullite, um, then obviously rugby isn't a big part of the family life. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
no, everybody that knew me was obviously pleased for me, and yeah, and for me it was a proud moment. In fact, I think I did an interview on Look North, down at Cannon's gym, as I recall. Very
All
short,
right.
and I think it was edited to yes, I'm really pleased.
I wonder if we can find that.
Off and down. Yeah.
So it was a home draw, which there was only one out of all the 5 Great Britain tours. There was only one at home. So what was it like representing your country at home?
Yeah, and having played abroad with the British police, I mean, and playing abroad, we did tours in France, Spain, and Italy. Um, Obviously, well, Union was very big over there. The crowds for us were family, friends, and and the rugby family, if you like. So when we were obviously playing in the 2000 series, um, yeah, it, I think I think again, if my family had been rugby, followers, then obviously they wouldn't have had far to travel and all that sort of stuff. But because they weren't, it sounds a bit awful. It sounds like I'm an orphan. Nobody cared about my rugby.
Nobody loves
They
me.
did. Yeah. But again, the people that sort of you're around during that part of your life are the people that would be there anyway to spectate. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I'd have quite liked to have gone touring, because obviously it was Southern Hemisphere, wasn't it? It was your New Zealand and Australia tours, but I wasn't part of the squads for that. So, so like I say, I got Salford 2 weeks.
Yeah. But you did get to beat the Australians.
Well, this is true. Yeah.
I mean, and get to the final.
Yeah, it was a good series. The squad was strong then, because obviously they'd had the 2 tours before, 96 and 98, and albeit there'd been quite a few changes, fundamentally that squad was still the same. So they'd obviously built on that, and there were some really good players at that time. Yeah.
And you got to the final, which was at Warrington.
Yeah.
Against the nemesis that is New Zealand.
Yeah. They were. There were some really strong players in there. Yeah, really strong. I mean, physically strong.
Yeah.
So whether they were playing professionally at that time, or whether they were just, like I say, that their makeup and their training. But yeah, it was a different level. Certainly playing against the Kiwis.
Yeah.
And the Australians. They were naughty. They were naughty in tackles. Yeah. But again, it was a good experience to even play at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you begin to look back, what was the most challenging part of playing internationally? Or playing rugby league, really?
Yeah, I think being in camp for that period of time, because we were obviously in England, and at the time of year that it was, it was quite intense. But again, the hotel and the facilities were all right. Yeah. And the group of people that were there were a good group of people. There weren't people that I would ordinarily socialise with. But we had that commonality of obviously rugby league. So yeah, I would say that actual series, that 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of being, sort of almost, it's like almost in prison and playing rugby in prison. Because you were confined obviously to base, and for that 2 or 3 weeks you had a very structured life that was imposed on you. But the rest of it, the club rugby definitely was the highlight of my life, and I suppose the only regret that I had with that was that I went over to Bradford. We should have stayed at Vixen's, even though we'd moved from Cottingham, well, Millhouse was saying Northern Foods Club, up to Hilltop. It did change, and obviously even when Ann Thompson moved across, which was quite a few years before that, Vixen's changed, but it had the core sort of 7 or 8 people, and then we did really well and got through to the Challenge Cup final around that sort of 98, 99 time. And that again was probably our strength. And then after that, because numbers were dwindling, everything else, myself, Gail, and Pauline all went over to Bradford, which again was on that M62 corridor. You can't beat driving up the M62, especially when you've been at work all day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I should, in hindsight, when you look back and you just think that should have been, we should have stayed as a club,
Yeah.
because rugby league, certainly women's rugby league, wasn't big then, and the strength was in staying local and playing as a team and a squad that you knew, as opposed to going and seeking, Bradford that had everybody that was in the GB squad at the time. So the games on a Sunday were just running in tries, which you didn't learn anything. So the most that I did learn, and the games that I did enjoy, were the ones where we even turned up with like 10 or 9. I think we put out once at Redhill, and that was a really hard game, but it was a really good game.
Yeah.
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 So those are the.
Yeah, so when you look back, the sort of rugby, your club life and playing is what you really enjoyed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, it was good, like I say, to be exposed to the international stuff, and the higher level of play. But yeah, club rugby is what it's about. Yeah,
yeah, and thoroughly
and that's
enjoyed it.
the same with anything, isn't it? It's like who you know, what you know.
Yeah,
And it is all about having fun. Because
it
if you're not having,
is, and that community, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
like I say, we played hard, but we certainly played harder. No, we
yeah,
worked
yeah.
hard and played harder. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. There was a good social setting.
It was, yeah, especially those Northern Food Days. That was a really good. It was a really good club setup as well.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
Hull City went and stole it. Football. Yeah.
So when you sort of look at what you've reflect on what have you achieved, what do you think?
What about the for rugby? You mean?
Yeah, about your rugby and your career really, and how it enhanced. So obviously playing sport and rugby, whether it be rugby league or rugby union, and how it enhanced your career because you then got to a high level within the police, didn't you? And as you say, did 30 years in the police. When you look at back
Yeah.
all that achievement and how it all interacted, what's
Yeah.
your
I mean, certainly. Like I think, like I say, fundamentally, it's about the people that you're around. So that the team and the team mentality. And I think when I played, I was probably one of the least team players of the squad. I was out on the wing, and if you gave me the ball, I'd run with it. But yeah, certainly the difference between a forward and and being out wide is a very different mentality. If you've got the sideline and you, aren't you? You got going in touch when you're out wide, whereas in the middle, then you've got quite a few people around you. But like I say, those games that you can remember where there was fewer of you. You were on dog poo park. You were playing on a pitch that the blokes had played on the day before. You were really lucky if it hadn't frozen and had all the dents in it, or that you could just slide in it if you went up to ask them, because it usually rained sideways up there. But yeah, definitely the teamwork and working together as a squad, which you did lose a bit of that when you go to that international level. Your mentality comes a little bit selfish. You're about you, and like I say, that move to Bradford was definitely one of the worst things that I could have done for me personally,
yeah,
and for Hull Vixens as it turned out.
yeah.
The team that you grew up with.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can understand that. But when you look back now, look at women's sport, and obviously we've just had the Lionesses sort of victory in
Yeah,
women's football, and you look at the cricket and the rugby union and England women, what they're trying to achieve. What do you think you would say to this generation, the next generation about participating in sport and international sport?
Yeah. I mean, certainly the club stuff. Yeah, it's there. It's there. You make the best friends that you will do. You play, like I say, you work really hard. It keeps you mentally fresh as well as physically. and yeah, and now the world's their oyster, isn't it? You know, the platform's set for certainly women's football, and I would hope now that a lot of the women's sport will follow suit. You know, it just needed that exposure. It'll need continuous exposure, and I would say club level it still may struggle because obviously we've seen the international level, but that gets everybody's appetite. Yeah, so it's I don't think it's won yet, but it started in the right direction. And obviously everybody's been talking about those that have gone before, whether it be any of the women's sports, you know, and there's been people that have played at very high levels and done, I suppose, what Usopp did, which is you self-fund, you drive yourself around, you know, you have to organise your time around it. Your training is in your own time, if you can find that time. But yeah, the certainly the good parts outweigh the worst. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jo, I've absolutely loved catching up with you again. It's always nice
Yeah.
to go back into the dells of your history. And I just want to thank you for sort of sharing your memories and your stories of obviously playing rugby league at club, but also international level. Thank you.
Welcome.